Hello everybody, today we're going to continue my series on the thoughts on Civilization V, and in this episode I'm going to take a look at the Great Library, which is one of the earliest wonders in the game that's available to build. And in this episode I'd like to look at what the Great Library is, and then whether or not it's worth building, and this is going to be for either single player or multiplayer. Both require a different view, so we're going to tackle both of those topics today. But first, to get started, what is the Great Library? Well, it provides 3 science, which is a little bit of a boost, considering that the cities at that point in the game are going to be producing between 10 and 20 science. So it is a bit of a boost for sure. It also gives you a free technology. Now this is probably the biggest reason to build the Great Library, because you can actually choose the most expensive technology available to you and claim it for free. So that's kind of nice. You also get a free library in the city, so that means you don't have to worry about going back and building a library. Plus, because it's a free library, it doesn't have any maintenance costs, so that's kind of nice. And it also contains slots for great works of writing, and therefore it's going to give you a great scientist point as well. So especially if you're Babylon, this could result in some pretty fast early great scientists. So the question is it worth making? Well, first let's look at single player. I had a friend once tell me that his strategy relied on getting the Great Library as being his only way to survive against the AI. Now, I thought that was kind of strange, because that tells me one thing. He's not playing against the very hardest levels of the AI, because if he was, he would have no chance of building the Great Library. You don't have much of a chance of building any wonders if you're playing against the very highest levels of the AI. I'm talking Immortal and Deity. And on Deity, yeah, you're never going to build the Great Library. So this tells me that this certain friend is not playing at very hard difficulties. So if he's not playing at very hard difficulties, then you have to think to yourself, well, maybe I'm not playing with a very good strategy in mind. Because if I was playing with a good strategy, I could probably tackle the harder difficulty levels. Unless he just likes an easy game, which is fine, I guess, if that's what you want. So what I'm saying is, if you're playing single player, really the Great Library is not going to encourage you to just develop strategies to advance yourself along the different levels of the AI. And it's probably better to start figuring out different strategies that can let you play against harder AIs, so that you don't have to relearn everything once you do bump yourself up a level. So that's single player out of the way. There's no real reason to build the Great Library or to develop a strategy to build it. Alright, what about multiplayer though? Now, I think the Great Library in most multiplayer games tends to be the most popular wonder in the game. I mean, it does a lot for your early research and science. It gives you a boost. I mean, there's lots of advantages. to having the Great Library. So it goes quickly, and everyone loves science. It's just in our nature. Now, should you try it in a multiplayer game? Well, one of the reasons why I decided that I would stop trying to build the Great Library in multiplayer games is because I was tired of people rage quitting after they spent 10 to 15 turns trying to build the Great Library and then failing at the last minute and losing all of those turns to pretty much nothingness. So they rage quit, and that ruins the game for everyone else. So that made me want to not make the Great Library so that the people I was playing against wouldn't rage quit. If they really wanted the Great Library that bad, I would let them have it. Also, because it's such a popular wonder, your chances of getting it are very slim, unless you have a certain advantage, like the Egyptians, for example, have an advantage to building wonders. So if they do go straight for writing, they would have an advantage over any other Civ at building the Great Library. I'm not saying that they have the biggest advantage of all the Civs. I'm just saying it's an example. So if you're playing in a game where the Egyptians are playing, you really have to think twice about whether you want to attempt to compete with them for the Great Library. But let's say you do have a good feeling that you have the production in your city. Let's say there's a lot of salt or other hill resources around your starting capital, and you think that your capital probably has the production necessary in the early game to build the Great Library. Let's say maybe even you have loft forests that you can chop down. In that case, the question is, should you go for the Great Library? Well, just because you can doesn't always mean you should. And I think that is the story of the Great Library in Civ 5. Even if you do have an awesome production city, even if you are Egypt and have that bonus, what's your long-term goal in the game? Because if you look far enough down the road, the seemingly technological advances that the Great Library is going to give you are really going to look smaller and smaller as the game goes on. By the time the game is in the modern era and you're making 1,000 science in each city, or not in each city, in your empire, that 3 science bonus, even if it does stack with other multipliers, it's not that big of a deal, is it? I mean, that's just a few extra population worth of science. So in the late game, really, the Great Library is a useless blip. And I've played too many games where I've seen the guy who is farthest behind on technology in the game, and there in his capital he has this moss-covered Great Library that he built early on, but then, due to other decisions he made, lags behind and eventually fails in his science pursuit. What I'm saying is, for a long-term game, the Great Library doesn't matter. And especially since those early game turns are so important for building other things like settlers to put out your cities faster, establish your territory faster. I think the Great Library would hurt more people, if you really thought about it, than it actually helps. Now, it does give you a free technology, and this can be drastic if you are in a struggle of some sort early in the game. For example, if you're playing on an East versus West team map, the team that gets the Great Library is going to get to ranged ships faster than the other team. Now this is a bit of an advantage because that means they can, if they, assuming both teams are equal, they can get more ships with ranged firepower and effectively rush the other team if they have coastal cities. And that can, in that specific scenario, that can be hard to deal with. I think you can deal with it if you have enough archers on land, and you did your due diligence and built walls and built triremes to just help buy you some time until your own range shipping can get out there. So in that situation, sure, the Great Library is going to give you an immediate advantage in early warfare, but as soon as the enemy catches up to that key technology, I think it's compass, once they get there as well, that technological advantage pretty much diminishes right there. The same can go for the other side of the tech tree, the bottom section. Let's say you're playing a fight for all, and you start off next to another Civ that has kind of blocked you in, and you feel like the only chance you have of getting anywhere in that game is to rush attack that player. Now, normally I frown on early war because I do believe it hurts you and the other person more than it's ever going to help you, and especially in a fight for all. I mean, you don't want to be at a disadvantage against all the other players who aren't at war. But if you are in a situation where, let's say you're completely blocked in, you have nowhere to go, the only chance you have in the game is to break out and attack this player, the Great Library might be a good decision. Maybe it will get you to crossbows faster, and you can do a crossbow rush before he, let's say 20 turns before he has crossbows. I mean, that could be hard for him to deal with. So the Great Library can be a huge advantage in an early war, but just be smart. Early war, even if you do have an advantage, is usually not as profitable as you think it is. It's probably in the long term going to put you farther behind than if you decided not to go to war. So really only use it if you have no other chance of getting anywhere. So what I'm saying is the Great Library, although it's situationally okay, just because you can build it doesn't mean you should. It has to match up with your immediate strategy. You have to have some sort of play that, whether it's going for crossbows in a rush or whether it's going for maybe getting you into some sort of sea-based rush, and those are defensive wars. Really, you feel like you have no choice. Okay, build the Great Library. And then there's one other situation. Let's say that everyone in the game is a pro player and they don't really care about the Great Library either. They don't expect to go to war soon, and so they don't want to waste the early game time building it. So it gets neglected. No one builds it for quite a while until eventually it'll become quite cheap. Let's say you realize that you're pretty close to the Middle Ages, and your city could build it in 6 turns or less. In that case, sure, go for it. Probably the biggest advantage that it'll actually give you is the free technology, which will again get you to a military rush situation, or might even get you early access to a wonder that you like. Sure, build it. If it's cheap enough, you can build it. And also the free great scientist point that you get will probably give you an early great scientist, and that's kind of nice too. So yeah, if it's cheap enough, try for it. Be willing to stomach the loss if you fail to build it when you've only got one turn left. I'm sure we've all tasted what that feels like. So yeah, there's some situations where you can build it if it's cheap enough, if it fits your strategy, for an early move. But in every other situation, don't worry about it. It's just going to slow you down. Don't build the great library. It's not worth it. In my opinion, it's one of the worst wonders in the game, and I hardly ever even think about building it. Alright, that's all. Talk to you later.